CIG just launched one of their most anticipated spaceships into their game in one of the least cool ways possible. The upcoming Master Modes change is creating some fear, uncertainty, and doubt within the community, but we're still on track, in theory, for one of the most monumental updates in this game's history. This video is going to start off with a course of cynicism, followed up with an amuse-bouche of excitement and hype. Let's dive in. So as Cloud Imperium Games attempts to stay on target for a potential 3.23 patch that could be simply earth-shattering for the Star Citizen community, they have also dropped the 3.22.1 patch, and it is a patch. The feature list is so short and frankly uninteresting that I can summarize the whole thing by saying it fixes some bugs and there's minor balance adjustments here and there. However, there is one part of this update that is getting a lot of attention within the community, and that's the fact that an almost feature-complete final-ish version of the Idris has been added to the game in a randomly spawned event where players can capture this massive ship. The Idris is now officially the biggest player flyable ship in the game, although you can't yet own the ship, you can capture it and fly it, but it's the biggest ship by a significant margin. The interior videos showcasing the exploration of this ship are just mind-boggling. The ship itself is bigger than most video game levels. It's also tied to a contest where players can win the Idris P, which normally sells for something like $1,300 or something crazy like this. And as you can imagine, all of this has gone over incredibly well within the community. Firstly, the accessibility of the event is a problem. The Capture the Idris event doesn't spawn frequently, and many players spent hours just trying to find a mission, jumping between servers, or the missions would just bug out once they did spawn, or they could easily be broken by players. The other problem was that getting onto the ship to participate, you generally had to be part of a fairly large crew, or you would get killed by a bigger crew trying to do the same thing. So casual players had a pretty difficult time of getting into this event. And on that note, I'd also like to give Salty Mike a huge thank you for lending me his footage of the event. Sadly, I just didn't quite have the free time to sit around hoping for a chance to do a thing in Star Citizen. I wish I did, and I greatly appreciate those who are able to share the event online with people who simply couldn't participate. Now, because there is a contest to win one of these ships, there's also a bit of animosity surrounding the event, and a lot of people are, let's just say, not the happiest about how CIG is kind of teasing this ship and using it to launch another sale of the Idris and drum up hype for it. And while from the outside you might be thinking, well, what's the big deal? It's just a spaceship. Well, Star Citizen is a game that's mostly built around hyped up ships, and this is probably one of the hypiest ships so far. So to tease a big reveal event for it and then make it inaccessible to most of the player base doesn't sit well with most, myself included. And I just gotta add it to the ever-growing list of questionable decisions being made by CIG. Now, all that said, the footage coming out of the event does look really cool, and the interior space of this thing is just crazy. It's got more hangar space than any other ship in the game by a large margin, more firepower, more armor, more rooms, more storage, everything. It's just really an incredible ship. I'm really hoping that these are fun to take into combat and run the bigger missions with. Watching the gameplay footage, I'm still really not sold on how fun it's going to be in one of these things. Being a turret gunner, for example, which is probably going to be one of the more important roles on this, looks quite underwhelming, but sitting on the bridge or seeing people come in for landings in the massive hangar does look quite cool. And CIG has stated before that they have these big lofty goals for capital ship combat, but we're just not seeing that in the game yet. Now, one of the biggest upcoming features slated to launch with the next patch 3.23 is Master Modes, and this will fundamentally rewrite the rules of engagement for pretty much every ship in the verse. New top speeds, new turn speeds, strafe speeds, all weapons will be gimbaled, new zoomed in firing mode for better accuracy, much closer combat experience overall. It's a huge change to all spaceship combat, especially since it's a complete rebalance and rework of like 200 ships. Thank you, CIG employees who are going through the trouble of doing all of that. Now, of course, to nobody's surprise, not everybody is on board with this change. Master Modes has been in testing for a while, with lots of players able to test it out and chime in on how it plays, and a lot of veteran pilots who have grown to enjoy many things about the current way ships behave are pointing out flaws with the system that will hurt the skill curve for the game and potentially make it less interesting for high-skilled players. CIG has stated that they feel the system greatly improves the fleet battle dynamics, but it still has some problems when it comes to 1v1 spaceship combat. And this is an important thing to recognize, as I would imagine a huge percentage of the conflicts in Star Citizen will end up being 1v1 ship fights. And while I'm not personally experienced enough in the high-end Star Citizen space combat to have a strong opinion on what CIG should do with the current state of Master Modes, I will say that generally, big games tend to cater to the biggest group of players. It's often a smart business decision for the short term, but it could be argued to have detrimental long-term effects if the high-skill players just don't really have enough ways to continue increasing their skill set. It's a bit of a conundrum, as piloting is far more complex than, say, your typical first-person shooter controls, and you don't want new players getting into the game and never being able to get a kill in a dogfight. Yet, in pretty much every single flying combat game I've played, the skill difference is massive. So how do you give new players a fighting chance? Well, CIG has a lot of ideas, one of them being a new gimbal system that allows all weapons on ships to have a degree of auto-aim. However, activating that auto-aim comes with a rate-of-fire nerf, so high-skilled players could potentially aim manually and outdamage their opponents if they're a better shot. And while I like this idea a lot, the balancing of this mechanic comes down to many details. Where before, a top-tier light fighter pilot might be able to avoid the majority of all incoming fire with their superior agility and piloting skills, now they might have to eat up a few more shots, making, say, a group of low-skilled players a much bigger threat if they're all using auto-aim and landing a lot more shots. It's certainly an interesting conundrum, but I'm still looking forward to Master Modes, and I'm sure CIG is going to be refining it from here on out. In fact, they've pretty much said that much. I'd imagine we have at least several years of pretty hardcore balancing ahead of us. Now, the last Star Citizen live show dug a bit more into the distribution centers. These are sort of major hubs for a lot of top-tier mission running. Even CIG is sort of labeling them as more endgame content, and it's a bit of work to dig through an hour of Star Citizen Live for just a few nuggets of info, but the main takeaway for me was that there's going to be about 13 of them between Microtech and Hurston. It's a little disappointing that they didn't opt for putting some on ArcCorp, but maybe that's just waiting on the new building interior technology that they're working on. ArcCorp would make a lot of sense as a major hub for distribution, and it would certainly be a cool location for these types of missions, but I think they're sort of technology limited at the moment. It also seems that we're probably heading for a tier 0 version of these distribution facilities, where the scope and ideas behind them is quite cool, but whenever the devs were faced with some questions about what we would be able to do in the distribution centers or some cool ideas with them, a lot of the responses were, yeah, that seems like it would be possible, or yeah, we could definitely look into that down the road. So I think a lot of the more advanced cool features will probably be coming much further down the road. So with all that said, CIG is always keeping things interesting for the community, whether it's interesting with the new stuff they're talking about or creating drama or bugs or whatever. It's always interesting to follow this game. I'm personally still very excited for the 3.23 patch with its absolutely massive feature list, and I'm also curious to see when more server replication tests occur. I think CIG really has their noses to the grindstone on that tech in particular, as it really does need to be working this year if they're going to hit any of their long-term goals. What do you guys think about all the latest happenings within Star Citizen? It's a funny juxtaposition of not having too much to do in the game right now in front of potentially one of the biggest content drops we'll ever see. Hopefully patch 3.23 arrives on schedule. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to drop me a like, hit that subscribe button for more content like this, and ding the notification bell to beat the YouTube algorithm with me. And up next, check out this video on a new horror extraction shooter where players also get to be the monsters. It's a fun twist on the concept and definitely worth checking out. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap signing off.